Hello, dear ones. It's Kelly Folsom here, and I want to welcome you back to another Vital Art session. In today's lesson, we are going to be painting this fabulous old green. It's an old onion bottle, a really deep green with this beautiful red tapestry and some green grapes today. This setup has a very old world Dutch still life feel to it, very Vermeer quality. So I'm super excited to dive in with you all today and get started. So just so you know, this is a wet tone of burnt umber and a little bit of black to try to get this to more of, well, kind of an old world sort of Van Dyke brown, which, you know, sort of was a deeper, darker, richer brown in my opinion. Now, this composition really could go a number of different ways. You could do a vertical, you can do it horizontal, which is, you know, what I'm gonna do today. You can also, I would think if you had a square, more of a square format, that would be really pleasing as well. So I'm starting off just massing in my onion bottle here. And remember from our last lesson about proportion, so I want to keep that in mind. You know, I'm trying to keep this to about a third of the width and height of the canvas, a third to a half roughly, to leave enough room for the background material, that beautiful red cloth that is in here. And then getting things like this, these movement things, and also the reason why I think this might be good for a square, could work for a square, is the fact that it is a rather circular type composition. I just always try to use the same size for our lessons, so the 8x10s. All right. So I'm going to do a little more black here on the bottle just to get just to really push the depth. Some ivory black. In this case, this is going to be dark against light. The bottle will be darker than the background. So you want to be thinking about those value contrasts right away. And then of course we have those lovely green grapes, which are going to be light against dark over there. Okay, so these onion bottles are so lovely. They're, you know, I think they were actually made for sailors on the old-timey ships so that their alcohol would not spill, you know, their rum and whatnot. All right, once I get that shape in, and then I just kind of want to block in sort of an envelope shape here for the grapes coming off on the left, and I'm going to do a little lighter version of this, just thinner, for the cast shadow from the bottle, how it's throwing a cast shadow onto the grapes. Okay, good. And if you wanted to right away, you can get a sense of, you know, where the highlight's going to be. With your highlights, make sure that you always pull them closer into the center. There's also more the local color of this object around the highlight, but this will be a good start just to bring some focus already into the center. I'm going to step down here. Since I'm doing a horizontal, I'm going to put in, well, if you're doing a vertical, you would do this too. I'm going to put in the table edge here, stepping down in space, so anything lower down on the picture plane is closer to us, just in case you didn't know that. Anything higher up is further away, so you always want to look at those baselines. Let's get some cast shadow in here. Look at the cast shadows to give you any kind of angles that you need to bring in some more depth, more directional qualities, like there's an angle of a fold here that we want to get in. And really this bottle is pretty much as simple as this. you know. We might add some more reflections, of course, some little details, but all in all, this type of object makes for a very simple painting process. It's also why it's maybe kind of nice to pair it with something a little bit harder, like a cloth like this. So I kind of want to figure out, here's a nice angle, and then that's coming off the edge here with this cloth. All right, I'm going to go ahead and block in the dark red of that cloth, since that's such a strong color in this composition. And I'm going to start with the shadow red in the background, doing some black, some cad red light, some either red oxide if you have it, or Avignon orange or burnt sienna, one of those. I'm going to kind of block this in relatively dryly, I guess. You know, there's medium in here, but I'm kind of scumbling it on in a way. You know, not like slathering it on. So that way some of the underneath color shows through as well. I'm going to angle this a little bit more. So you can use your brush to actually pull paint off. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to paint over these edges as well. We can always bring that back later on. Now, then down in front, it's in light on this perpendicular plane, but it's not, you know, as full of light as what's on the top plane. Now, I like to make my brush strokes go with the angle of the plane that I'm painting. So I'm going to go up and down here. And let's just kind of indicate with the same, no need to put in a different color, but the table edge where that's going to be. Actually, let me just take some burnt umber and let's just kind of mass in the shadow here underneath the table edge. Okay, now for the light version of that red cloth. And I want to keep in mind that it's not, I want to look at the green grape, you know, so like the green grape might be like this, you know, that kind of value. And sometimes it's helpful to do something like that so that you can make sure that you're keeping track of your values. All right, so more red, and this time a little bit of the ochres, the ochre and Naples yellow, because it does go to more of an orangey red. I'm going to sprinkle some of that around here. But that's a little too big of a jump. You see how big of a value jump that is? It's too much. So I'm going to add back in some of this darker red. There's little shimmers of that on that cloth, but it's not, this is a gentler transition here. A gentler step in value. And we don't need to take that off. We could just paint into it. It's all good. I'm never really a huge fan of taking anything off unless it's just a total, you know, absolute disaster. Sometimes you don't know what you can do with paint until you make mistakes, and then, you know, go, well, how can I adjust that color or that paint without, you know, taking it off? All right, so already this is starting to kind of set the stage for our painting. And I'm going to go back to, oh, you know what color I needed for this bottle in the grapes. I forgot to put it out. Is the phthalo green. Cool. Or Mimiri Puro calls it Cupic green. Deep. Okay. Yeah, I need that color. Whew, that was a close one. All right, so some of that with the black. Awesome. Gonna get that really even richer and deeper, not Richard, richer. Richer and deeper, more of that emerald green. And that color is really going to come in handy as well for the green grapes and the lighter bits of green that are on here. Remember, flat on the bottom, especially with this bottle. But with anything round, you want flatter on the bottom, rounder on top. Okay? All right. Now, actually, you know, because I just can't stand it, let's get to the green grapes. We're going to do some of that phthalo green cool, some cad yellow deep, and something orange, okay? So if you have a little burnt sienna, actually just take some of this. It needs some warmth. So I'm using some Chinese orange, so if you have that, go for it. But we have to start a little bit warmer here. And then we'll put all that cool kind of dusty stuff on top. If any of this, you know, if you get these like unmixed striations of color, that is fantastic. Utilize those. They're so beautiful. You know, sometimes we just have a tendency to over mix color. I'm just going to paint some of this on top to get that more accurate in color. So with green grapes, I did that a little too close. With green grapes, they're so light in value, so the overall local value of the object is much, much lighter. And so, but we don't want to go to full light yet. We want to kind of put in like a middle tone like this. And then I'm mixing a little more of that green and also a little more red for the shadow version, the cast shadow version over here. Now, the cast shadow of these grapes are actually lighter in value than the glass, but they are still darker because they are in shadow. And maybe even a little warmer, so throw some red in there. This red and green, you know, it's an excellent combination to neutralize one another and get some more natural feeling colors. If you just paint these greens totally without the red, they're going to feel very, very out of sync in the painting. Okay. Now, while I'm there, I could also indulge myself a little bit. Why wait? You know, the background's pretty neutral. We can get to the background here in a minute. I'm going to indulge myself a little bit in some reflected light that I see. And, you know, that's a little, maybe a little too intense. So I'm going to add back in some of the dark. Let's try some yellow ochre with that. Looking for, there we go, something a little bit subtler. I am going to build some more light and glow on these, but I don't want to take this too intense. All right. And also we have, you know, a little peekaboo of that, and also the leaf under here. So kind of mixing that in with that black to get some suggestions of those reflections. And actually, this would be a great little place to get some of that green in, would be around the highlight. Don't worry, we can make this look a little bit nicer here in a bit. But already that, as you can see, it just kind of punches it up a notch. Kicks it up a notch. Then same thing as what we do on red or purple grapes. Starting to get in some highlights, even some of the ones that are in shadow back there. Don't have to do all of them, but let's get in some highlights. And then of course, you know, if you want to tone this down just a hair or integrate it more, you can just use your knife. Remember again that the smushing with the knife is wonderful for leaving some paint on there and just kind of smudging it together. Especially for some of these effects like glare on glass, shine on copper, it's incredibly useful to use your knife like that. And as you can see, some of that white kind of mixing in with the dark underneath already creates some of that like dusting on the bottle. It's fabulous. So exciting. That's kind of what painting is all about, is staying excited, staying enthused by what you're actually putting down on the palette. I mean, this is what makes you want to wake up in the morning. What can happen today with the paint? Okay, So now I think it's a good time to go to the background. Actually, the first thing I'm going to start with is the cast shadow here. When you have cloth against a background, you must always have some cast shadow, right? So it's thick, it's on top of the background. Not to say that this is the right color, but we are going to have some cast shadow there against the background. Okay. And that always kind of creates like a triangle shape. And what I'm seeing can happen there, actually, just taking some of this with the white, is utilizing some more of that dusting that's on that top left edge to pop it forward from that cast shadow color. And you know, if you get too much on with your palette knife, which may be the case here, but if you get too much on, that's when, you know, you can use the brush, because the brush always takes paint off, right? So you can apply it with a palette knife to put some thick light down, but then if you need to kind of finesse it or quiet it, use your brush to kind of brush into it. And the bristles, using a brush without paint on it, takes paint off. So a lot of times people are just doing the opposite. They're trying to apply paint with a brush that doesn't have enough paint on it, and then they're trying to blend with a brush, and that's just taking paint off and dulling the color and look so many times. So anyways, it's an interesting aspect of painting. All right, let's go to the color in the background. I'm going to do raw umber primarily. I'm going to use up my dirty white for this. This is a great place to use up that dirty white, or white that has other colors in it. And this background is green. I don't have to copy that exact color though. So, and I know that I want it to be, the background to be light, a little bit lighter than what I have against the bottle, but also darker against the grapes. And that means I need to go a little bit darker here. So I'm going to add in some green, some more, let's do some more black and ochre. I want a little bit of that green in that background. Let's see that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Could, let's add in some more umber, raw umber, excuse me. Because obviously we can transition. We don't have to have the same value all over. And if that's feeling a little too cold and icy, again, we can throw in something warm, like the Chinese orange. I'm just going to paint over where that stem is for now. Okay, but I have to get enough of this on here to see, you know, if it is going to work. So I kind of guesstimate, make a guess as to, you know, do I think that's in the right ballpark? But then I really have no way of telling until I get it on there. And that's maybe kind of the scary part a little bit. Like, oh no, am I going to mess up? And you very well could, and that's all right, you know. That's how you learn to paint. So you're not always going to make all of the right decisions every time, much like life, right? All of us make misjudgments, things like that. It's not as big of a deal as we all tend to think it is. Pretty much everybody's willing to, it's funny, you know, we're so willing a lot of times to deal with other people's mistakes and forget and forgive. But with painting, it's like, oh my God, no, I cannot mess up. And, you know, we just want to be a little more kind to ourselves That's for sure. All right, so I feel like that is looking good there, gelling pretty well, gelling like a felon. Okay, we need some light on the tabletop plane. You know, I kind of like how this has some change in the background too, by the way, where maybe some of it looks a little warmer, some of it looks a little darker, and almost like a little mottled. I can always take a soft hair brush after this paint sets up and, you know, soften out brushstroke edges and things like that. I'm going to throw some of this background color into this shadowy grape stuff. Okay. Sorry, my okay. All right, now going back to, actually, you know what, let's just get a few bits of information on the fabric, and then we'll go back to those grapes over there that are staring at us. I want to, well, I say that and then I paint this eucalyptus leaf. Okay, so after I do that, mostly because there's very little lights in this painting, and so like the highlight and the eucalyptus leaf, things like that, are pulling a lot of weight for the lighter neutrals. So the more intense I can make those, the better, you know, just so that they can pull a little bit more weight. And there will be only so big I can go on that. That might be about as big as I can go. Okay. This one just needs to get redone. It's starting to get a little, you know, wonky looking. All right. Now these in the background, they can't be quite that light, but it is a good opportunity to get some more lighter value back there. These eucalyptus leaves. And little seedlings. I love those little seedlings. And then, of course, these kind of go into shadow on the left, so a little bit more, well, not quite that much, but a little bit darker and warmer. We need a lot of the red in there, you know, so that the colors make sense in this painting. That red cloth is so intense, you know, that it's bouncing some of its red into the leaf. And, you know, the red neutralizes the green as well, so. And you can also pick some of it up from underneath by doing strokes like that. I like to do shorter strokes like that on these leaves. Okay, and then you can use a knife to indicate, and you can see how powerful these kind of overlaps are to give more depth. You can use a knife to get another overlap. Anytime you can see, like, okay, there's a light in front of a dark, or this object is in front of that, you know, it's critical that we get those in. Those little, some of those little details that really do count for something. Whereas other details, not so important. So little details like this, just, you know, this little shape of, I guess this is where the cap would sit. So just black for the underplane, a little bit of white added in for the dusting on the top plane, but not too much. And then some highlight, just using the back of the brush. Just still looking a little bit awkward to me. Maybe it's that I need to break that edge a bit. We don't need that edge. Maybe totally clear the whole way. Okay. And you know, if you don't get a shape exactly the way you want it, use the paint that's around it or remix that paint. I don't really have anything left for that. I already used it all up, so, and that's okay. But going back to the black, the sort of oxide red and some cad red light to kind of carve this out some more. I don't mind the imperfection of that actually, but just to show you how you can adjust it. Now, we've got a curve here. There's a curve with the shape of the fold here. So, actually, this might be a great chance too. Anytime I've got this transparent green on here, I like to use it almost as a black with the red. So for some of this pattern that's back here, and again, curve the pattern. Sometimes I'll even curve it if I don't see it that way, just because it does, those curved brush strokes just help give an illusion of the tube, the sort of cylindrical tube that's happening with this fold. This all kind of falls into depth, deep shadowiness. Remember, keep all of this more suggestive because it's way back here. We don't really, that's not really where it's going to count the most. The place that actually might count a little bit more might be up here in front. Some of that detail in the fabric. We've painted this fabric before in a little bit of a different scenario. And less is more in this case, I feel. You know, always let the star of your show be your guide. You know, when you start, you know, sometimes we just want to do all that stuff. It just is satisfying to put in everything and put in all the details. And really, a lot of times to get a more masterful look in your work, it's a lot of times it's about editing out, not adding more, you know. So it's just really tempting sometimes because we want to just do it all. I feel like this needs to be anchored down a little bit more. And sometimes we just want to do it just because we want to do it. And in that case, I'd say just do a study, you know, of a complicated fabric like that or something to satisfy that urge. But anytime you're making a work of art, you want to be thinking more about it that way, not just as showing off what you can do or satisfying your urge for detail, you know, but you're solving visual conceptual problems, and you know, using some restraint is always a sign of sort of a sophistication in a work and a sign of maturity in my point of view. All right, so creating a little fold there, creating a little fold here. Again, I don't need to paint the entire fold, but this movement of the fold into the bottle is incredibly useful. Again, letting the star of the show be my guide. Oh, red reflected in here. Anything that's going to lead me back to that, or again, that sort of circular motion that I've created with this setup here, anything that achieves that, well, you know, do it, put it in. That's not quite integrated enough, so just kind of flatten it back out and do it again. Oh my goodness, I picked up like the biggest glob of Avignon orange ever. Now the other temptation, of course, is to just stare at this bottle for a long time and you start to see everything, you know, and you see it out of context to the values of the bottle as a whole and the painting as a whole. And we need some of this red, but we want to be careful. I want to be careful not to raise the value too much of the red or of the bottle. because overall, when you look at the bottle, minus the highlight and reflections, you know, it still needs to feel like, oh, like it's this beautiful, dark, rich, you know, glowing, not glowing, but dark, rich thing. We do have some glow, like there's a little bit of glow there. And since it is glass, a little bit of glow passing through. But since it's such a dark bottle, it's very, very subtle. That's nice. Okay, for final touches, a little bit of glow into some of these grapes. I want to concentrate front and center, meaning center of the form, and front and center of the bunch of the grapes. So using some cadmium yellows, pretty much straight out of the tube for some of the transmitted light going through the grape. And also that's going to kind of walk me back into space there a bit as well. A little bit of a quieter version for that. For, you know, on dark grapes we use cab red light a lot for that. So in this case we're using cad yellow light and maybe cad yellow deep together to get a little bit of glow in those grapes. And then last but not least might be just a little bit of dusting on the grapes themselves, and that's going to be relatively cool. So like black and white, maybe some of that green that we've got going on into the mixture as well. And don't forget, if you have to redo the highlight, that's okay. Better to just paint over and redo it if it's starting to become a problem. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for being here, and I hope that this has been of value to you, and as always, I wish you happy painting. Bye.